I know scientific theories are, what is it? Scientific theories accurately describe the world based on evidence. That is correct.
Correct.
Now, although they, I'm not going to say accurately, although they have a lot of evidence, although they have a lot of facts, they are still theories for a reason. They do not, and they're not laws, and they definitely do not contain the word true. So, for example, the theory of the subconscious is just
There's
that.
no scientific theory of the subconscious.
And there's definitely not a law, right? So even when it comes to the human
There
mind,
isn't there isn't even a theory about it.
even better. That's even better for the point that I'm about to prove, right?
No, it's
Uh,
not, because the
well,
idea
what's
of
my
the
point?
conscious isn't a scientific theory.
So what was the point that I was going to prove?
I don't You were trying to make scientific theories sound weak by presenting something that isn't a scientific theory. So that's a completely unfair way of going about trying to characterize scientific theories.
So the subconscious mind is not a scientific theory.
No.
It is considered because I mean, it's taught in colleges. Psychiatrists use it to diagnose people as far as mental health, and I mean, we use it as a basis already. But I didn't know this. Maybe I did not know this because this is
It's not a real scientific theory. Like
so.
there are things called like theory of mind in psychology, and in, well, it's not really sociology, I guess, but those are not scientific theories. What psychology is not exactly science. I mean, it kind of is, but it also kind of isn't. Because in psychology, if you get a correlation of zero point 0.3, you've basically changed the world of psychology. Their standards for like correlation are very low because of how extraordinarily complex trying to understand behavior in psychology actually is.
Interesting that phrase you use turn change the world. Are you familiar with the
What?
and you said you would have changed the world if you
You would
altered the
change the world of psychology.
exactly. That's the interesting statement that you made. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the evolution of psychology. You do realize the original definition, not the current working definition, but the original definition of psychology from the Greek civilization, the Latin root, the Latin definition was the study of the soul. Are you familiar with that definition? Etymology of psychology, or if you want to break it down linguistically, psyche means the definition of psyche is soul, ologies, the study of. So I'm just before we get into the psychology thing, because to understand the human mind is to understand reality itself, if you ask me. And I think I find it interesting that most people are not familiar that the definition of psychology has been altered for whatever reason over the last couple hundred years. And I don't find it to be a coincidence that when I study ancient psychological behavioral systems, you have the idea of cosmology and the study of the origin of the universe. So it's interesting how psychology at one point was the study of the soul. If you go to indigenous, let's just say you go to Africa and you look at their cosmology, you look at their psychology, they'll tell you that as I'm speaking to you right now, my name's Ramal speaking to you, I, the soul, is operating through this physical vessel speaking to you, and this is more of a indigenous psychology. But in Western society, since that term has changed over time, the science, what you just said, is just a theory and not even proven, is saying that I'm operating strictly through my brain. Two completely different approaches to understanding the human mind, and yet as Western society, we've never even heard of this alternate perspective. So I think that people who haven't, if we don't understand the mind over in Western psychology, what else do we not understand about reality? Because the mind is how we perceive reality. It's a deep rabbit hole if you think about it.
So I think I would like to point out a couple things. Number one, like old isn't gold,
I
right?
didn't say
The
it was.
ancient world didn't even know that viruses existed. Like this key aspect of the world around us was completely off their radar.
But
So
astronomy,
I think
but they
if
calculate
we
astronomy with
if
They
mathematics.
we
were
even insinuate that ancient knowledge
uh,
holds truth that we in the modern age have not discovered, I think that's
except
really
for binary code.
disingenuous.
Except for binary code.
They
Binary
were
code is over 20,000 years old, and that can be proven with
That's incorrect, but
West
writing
African symbols.
writing is not even 12,000 years old. Binary code is not 20,000 years old. But the idea that
symbols are
you
over.
talked for a very long time and nobody
I mean,
interrupted you.
but I have answers. You may say
You talked for a very long time and nobody interrupted you. The idea that Sumerians were great astronomers is a joke. They didn't do astronomy. They thought the sun orbited the Earth. They kept track of how long does it take for the new moon to come about. A 5-year-old could do that. Okay, it's literally just counting patterns. A group of people that didn't understand that the Earth even moves were not astronomers. That's like calling Galen a biologist or a doctor. No, the vast majority of everything he ever said was false. He said some things that, again, a 5-year-old could know is true, such as blood is necessary for somebody to live. Yeah, congratulations, right? But to elevate these people to even remotely close to a modern standard of science is not accurate.
Okay. Hey, just quick question, Eric, do you know how copper pyramids work?
What do you mean work?
Like, do you know how they have any effect on the environment around them?
I'm not aware that they do have any effect on the environment around them.
And apparently most people are not, but I'm sure you're familiar with the pyramids that are all across this planet.
Yeah, I've heard of them, yeah.
Okay, so this idea that these ancient civilizations were just completely, they did not have a level of mathematics, articulation, science, and geometry that was well respected even to this day.
The only thing I said was science, and they weren't scientists.
So how do they build use architecture or mathematics to build pyramids?
Through labor.
But you're telling me it didn't involve calculation?
That's not science.
To build a 400-foot, over 2 million ton pyramid, you're telling me that's not science? That
is correct. Engineering is not science. It can be, but pure engineering is not science. Could you just define for everybody what science is?
I would say the application of knowledge.
No, that's in. Oh, well, that's in. Well, it depends on specifically what. That's a little too vague to call that one thing.
Says who?
If you ask me.
Says who?
Says me. So I would call that engineering, but it depends on what you mean. The application of knowledge that could just be arithmetic, because we could be talking about math, or we could be talking about engineering, or we could be talking about just general problem solving, which would be like, how do I dig this hole? Should I use a shovel or should I use a rake? Well, I should use a shovel. That's the application of knowledge. This clearly isn't science, right?
Even grammar is an application of knowledge.
Yes, like language is like knowing, just like somebody says, I don't know, like a conventional social situation where you use your intuition to try to figure out, yeah, that person looks like they're 60-ish years old, so I'm gonna guess that they're older. That's just application. So this isn't science. So do you have a different idea of what science might be?
I mean, we're gonna have to agree to disagree on what science is, and that's fair, because even the world,
science actually is well defined, and it's not what you said.
By who?
By society, the people that decide what the definitions of words are.
Which society? There's a lot of societies.
Collective human society. Science is a very specific thing that we do. At one time, nobody did math, but then we figured out, okay, we're going to make up this thing called math, and we're going to do it, and it actually is well defined. Science is also well defined. So,
I could be wrong. But if that's the case, then why is Chinese medical theory a completely different approach to the treatment of the human body than allopathic medicine?
That was a leap.
Those are just cultural differences.
No, they are. No, have you studied Chinese medical theory?
Not
It's,
really.
it's not just a cultural difference. They literally say earth, air, fire, and water are approaches to healing the human body. In allopathic medicine, you would get laughed at if that was your
Yeah, that's
basis. So
yeah.
it's not just a
Those are
cultural thing,
cultural. It's entirely a cultural
but
difference,
it's
actually.
different sciences. They don't agree. They don't agree on the approach to treating the human
It's
body.
a different methodology, hence it's a cultural difference. Like the fact that in America we use the imperial system for measurement, whereas in virtually every other country on the planet they use the metric system. That is just different cultural ways of doing science or engineering or whatever.
That's measurement. We're talking about treating the human body. This is
Yeah,
not
we're
just measurement.
talking about the methodology behind how somebody does something, and that is informed by cultural practices. So before we start talking about something completely different and change the subject, science is a methodological practice where you take there's different ways you can describe this, but here's how I'll do it, and Simon, you can add or modify if you feel like it. But science is a methodological practice where you take in information from the environment, generate hypotheses or explanations for what you think is responsible for those phenomena, but then you specifically have to test your idea, hopefully under controlled, partially idealized conditions. But sometimes this just means going out and collecting even more data in nature and then seeing if your predictions come true. And then that process has to be repeated many, many, many different times over and over again by other people to independently verify if your prediction actually is coming true, or if the variables you think are responsible for causing some amount of change really are the thing, because coincidences can happen, or somebody can just do the math wrong, or so on and so forth. So science is a process where you basically justify empirically uh, your your explanation for something, and you actively go out and try to debunk it.
It's important to note that this idea that you should have experimental evidence for your claims wasn't always the prevailing idea. Before our technology and communication evolved, it like all experiments were thought experiments, right? You look at Aristotle kind of being one of the first people to sort of look around the world in an experimental way. Most of the things he did was just pontificate about the world, because there were no telescopes, there were no microscopes, there were no means to test a lot of the claims that people wanted answers to. And so this idea that you actually needed hard, convincing evidence wasn't always around. This science did have kind of a period in like the 1500s where it was invented and then refined to be what we know now. A lot of people talk about the ancient world and what they knew and what they didn't know, but I mean, that was before people had this common agreement that, like, hey, if you're going to say these things about the natural world, you should actually show me something and convince me that this is the case. That wasn't always a practice.
So am I tripping, or are the pyramids of Giza perfectly aligned with the Orion star system that they still quote
You're
from
you're
to this day?
you're tripping. They
Can you Google that? Can you Google that for me, please? Because
I
that's
can
not a
show you. They,
yeah, please.
they're in the same general shape, but they're
Mhm.
not perfectly aligned at all. I mean,
Okay,
again,
well,
any 5-year-old looking at the Orion constellation could be like, well, there's 3 dots. They don't form a perfectly straight line, but they kind of are. So let me draw a picture of that. Oh, I just aligned. It's like, yeah, so what? Anybody can put blocks in the desert 3 in a row and have one of them slightly off center, and they don't perfectly align at all.
Blocks. You do realize these are
Yes,
these
they're
are
large blocks, but they're blocks.
25-ton blocks. That's bigger than
No,
semi.
some of the granite ones are around that big, but the virtually 99% of the pyramid is made of limestone, and those blocks are only a few tons.
No, that's fundamentally. You can look it up right now.
No, it's not. I have looked it up. You haven't looked it up because you wouldn't have said that if you had looked that up. Only the granite blocks in the burial chamber have a mass equivalent to what you said. The rest of the pyramid is made of limestone, and limestone blocks that large weigh a few tons, no more than like 4 or 5. Nowhere
Can we
close
Google
to
this?
25.
Can we Google this? Or
It has been Googled. If you want to Google it, go ahead. I don't really have anything to prove because I've looked into this multiple times. And here's the Orion constellation and the pyramids. They don't perfectly line up. But again, any idiot looking at these stars would have been like, there's 3 of them and they almost form a straight line. So let's put some pyramids in the desert, 3 of them, and have them almost form a line. There's nothing remarkable about that. There just flat out isn't. This just requires the ability to look at 3 dots in the sky and be like, yes, it forms the vague notion of a line. Building the pyramids was pretty awesome, but the idea that, and because they're aligned, there's something supernatural or cosmological or aliens or God or whatever is just so
no aliens,
unsupportable.
No aliens, just pure intellect. But the inside, you mentioned inside the king's tomb, that inside the king's tomb there was a 25-ton granite, or where 25-ton granite.
The granite blocks that make up the burial chamber inside the core of the pyramid, yes, those blocks are up to 25 tons.
That explanation right there, you're telling me that did not require a level of advance, a level of
not science.
Come on, Eric. Come on.
Yo, it's not science. Picking up heavy rocks is not science.
But
it's not science.
There's geometry in there.
That's math. And the application of math to do physical labor is engineering. These things aren't science. We went over what science is.
This has got to be intellectual masturbation right now. This has got to be intellectual masturbation. What do you? Come on, bro. Math is not science. Did I just hear this correctly?
Math is math. Math is a tool used by scientists. By the way, there you go. How heavy are the blocks in the Great Pyramid? 2.5 tons.
20. Wait, chamber 20. Okay,
it said 2.5. Yes.
25 to 80. So the inner ones were 25 to 80 tons. Wow.
Could be.
Okay.
Or up to, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on from that. I got last one. I'll let you go, or I'll dip out. I know you got other people you want to join. Atheism isn't a religion, which is interesting because I do view atheism as a belief system.
Nope, it's not a belief system.
That's the opinion I just stated. And this is
no. That's the opposite of what you said. You said atheism is a belief system. It isn't. Right. It's not a belief system.
I'm sure you would say that.
No, because that's what it is. Let me ask you a question. What color is George, the alien who lives on Sagittarius B star's 3rd planet? What color is his spaceship?
No idea. Doesn't exist.
So you don't have a belief about what color his spaceship is. Atheism isn't a belief. It's not a belief. Atheism is the equivalent of 0. You're trying to tell me it's 1. It's 0. Guess what? 0, well, this is actually kind of philosophical. Is 0 a number? No, it's not. It's a placeholder, but it's not actually a number.
It's a symbol. Yeah.
Right. And so atheism isn't a belief.
So, okay. So does that mean it's a placeholder. Let me ask you something.
No, I wouldn't call it a placeholder. It's not a thing. It's a word we use to describe something that isn't there.
Ontology?
A not belief.
Ontology is the nature of the nature of being, which the nature of being, I feel like, what if you say you, Eric, what are you in your essence? Are you a human being? So in essence, your ontology is that you're a human being existing. So you're not a spirit, are you? You don't have a spirit or a soul, would you
I don't
say?
think so.
Okay. So then in your ontology, you are a human being. In my ontology, you technically are not looking at me, you're looking at my physical body. I am an observer inside this physical body. So you might consider me a human being. I don't consider myself a human being. I consider myself an entity that can observe thoughts, I can observe emotions, and I can observe this physical body, but I'm not this physical body. And guess what? Things like meditation actually allow you to observe that. Now, are you saying, I'm just curious, are you saying that you are your thoughts and emotions?
It depends on what you mean. If you're asking the question, who is Eric? I would say that that's my mind, that's my identity. If you ask what what can you empirically support, physically support the idea of what you are, I would say, oh, I'm an obligate symbiote of, or how would you say that? An obligate eukaryotic symbiote, colony of eukaryotic cells, an obligate symbiote, which means they can't exist independent of each other. Um, at a reductionist physical level, I would say that's what I am. Or I could just tell you my chemical composition, and that would be what I am, right? But if you want to ask me who are you, then I would state like my something about my lived experience as a conscious agent.
Good
But
one. Good
what
one.
is that? I don't know. I can't weigh my consciousness or tell you exactly what it's like or what it's made of, because as far as we can tell, that's an unanswerable question.
Unanswered. You see, and this is what's interesting about the ancient Kemetic civilization, in which I studied their science, in which it was so. So, for example, one answer that I've come to be able to experience is that, in essence, I am pure consciousness, what they would call a soul. And I know the empirical part of, well, you can't actually weigh the soul because the soul is. I am a non-energy, non-matter intelligence. I can manipulate energy. I can manipulate matter that we call the spirit inside this body. I can decide to do and use this avatar, but I myself am not these things. I'm actually what I would consider the closest thing I've been able to see it in modern day society is what we would call dark matter. So, I mean, I am an intelligence that cannot die. As a matter of fact, they have testimonies, or I don't know if you believe in, not even believe. I don't know if you've ever heard of testimonies of near death experiences and people who have had out of body experiences, or
Yeah, I
how you
have.
define. So that's something that I don't know if atheists or science, I don't know what they do with that, but it seems to be a big question mark if you ask me about consciousness. How do you feel about the out of body experience
I
testimonies?
don't think I don't think they're anything special, because when they try to do things in controlled situations with these, they're completely incapable of generating any unique information, right? So people who claim they'll go under anesthesia or they'll do whatever, and they'll set up things where like on top of a shelf they'll have like written on paper, and absolutely nothing is ever produced from these. So the anecdotes are interesting, but they don't uniformly point towards anything, um, except whatever people's generic "I felt a presence, I saw a light," or whatever. But there's no there's nothing there that we can, if you can't repeat it, or if it's non-repeatable, then it's really not considered scientific for the
See, and
most part.
that's why I brought up the point about asking you if you were your thoughts or your emotions, because that has been repeatable in the state of awareness.
I have no idea what that
Ramal,
means.
if you believe that you are your consciousness, when I tell you that we can literally turn consciousness off with chemistry, what happens then? Do you die? Do you not exist? Because there are certain chemicals that we can push into your bloodstream that turns consciousness off. People regularly and routinely report that they do not dream while under anesthesia. In fact, it's so well reported that that's just something we kind of come to expect, that that's not an experience one will have. You don't have thoughts, you don't perceive things, as long as you're truly under given. But we can turn consciousness off. So if you are your consciousness, what happens then?
Are you turning consciousness off in the same way that someone goes to bed and say that they don't recall having a dream? Because the people do that all the time, and they're surely that person's surely still conscious. What when you say you turn their consciousness off and they don't recall anything, are you sure that they just don't have the memory of what they recall? Because memory and consciousness are two different things. I could go to bed tonight, wake up tomorrow, not remember my dream, and know that it was a memory issue. It's not that I was not conscious. And memory deals with magnetism, so that's not the
But
same.
we also know that if you don't experience REM sleep, you were not dreaming.
That's fine, but it doesn't mean that the see. And again, I consider the consciousness to be the soul. So I'm not saying that I died just because I wasn't dreaming. I would say that I'm lacking. Like, notice how children, they have dreams all the time. They have a great imagination. Why? Because they're not yet, you know, they're not stressed. They're not eating bad foods, so their pineal glands actively working. But just because someone's not dreaming, I wouldn't say their consciousness is turned off. I would say that it's a memory issue.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a memory.
Here's my
memory
question. Here's my question. Can you tell us what consciousness is in 30 seconds or less? Because what I find is people don't really have an explanation for what it is. They just explain a gazillion things all at once and say all those things are consciousness, which is like, there's nothing we can do with that information, right? So in 30 seconds or less, could you explain what consciousness is?
I would say consciousness is an intelligence, dark matter intelligence. I don't think it's the light photons emitted by the sun. I don't think it's physical reality itself. I think it is beyond physical reality and beyond light in itself. And it is a innate intelligence housed within dark matter.
What is dark
Why
matter?
are you so confident co-opting these scientific terms and just linking them to your idea of consciousness without any real citations or bodies of evidence? You throw out these words like dark matter and immaterial outside of matter, and that's consciousness. But you realize that like our understanding of the natural world has progressed because we build it progressively on foundations of evidence. Those were a lot of claims, like at least 6 that would need evidence of before it warrants belief.
So the why am I so confident is completely irrelevant. That might have been a projection, but the why deals with me studying comedic science. Okay. And what I have found is that not many people are honest in terms of studying from priests or historians of a indigenous Afrocentric perspective outside the ethos, mythos, and logos of the United States education system. That means you go to a different country, you don't get any peer-to-peer review study, and you study sciences and you study a culture that many people are not privy to, right? So my confidence comes from, I would say, my experience and the knowledge that I have learned, and seems to make the most amount of sense. Dark matter. Why do I speak on dark matter? I read a book by Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum called Dark Light Consciousness, where he adequately explained what dark matter was, how it's housed within us, and actually its connection to what they call U melanin. You can go to the National Library of Medicine.gov and you can read about U melanin. Again, it's a .gov behind it, so that now it's just not me anymore. You can read about U melanin versus pheomelanin and its effects on the human body, and how our perception to light is intimately connected to how we're perceiving reality. So if I am understanding that in essence I am this black bioluminescence that they call eumelanin, neuromelanin, and this can absorb light as an intelligence, right? This thing operates as an intelligence within us, right? Then this what I've been taught in my
doesn't make any sense.
What I've been taught in my education system was not the fulfillment of truth. Like, for example, they said, well, not they said, but for example, The idea of breath as it's associated to anxiety and mental health is completely not talked about in our society. I've come to realize that just because I grew up in this country and I was led to believe we were the standard of truth and knowledge, that is not the case. Right now, as you all are breathing, I bet you, I would bet $50 that both of you are probably breathing air into your upper chest. You're not breathing into the lower aspect of your diaphragm. Why? Because none of us are taught how to properly breathe. And guess what? Mental health being one of the worst issues that Americans are facing. Do you know that it is impossible for you to be frustrated or stressed while breathing controlled and slowly? This country has
for God's sake.
I know you're getting frustrated.
Because you're saying things that are ridiculous, like eumelanin is dark matter and can absorb information. I happen to know for a fact that if you're not under a particularly high amount of stress and you take in deep breaths, that will constrict blood vessels in your neck and starve blood flow to your brain and make you lightheaded. Okay, so deep breathing all the time for no reason is not healthy for you.
Is that what I said?
Mindful. Yeah, you said that you're just breathing in the top part of your lungs. You're not taking in the deep breaths or whatever. That's not a good idea to just tell somebody at all times you should. It's good to do that for a minute.
You just breathed wrong. You just did it wrong. You just did it wrong. I wouldn't even instruct you to breathe that way. Literally, like proper breathing. Okay, here's the thing. I would even say it's not even so much about deep breathing as it is about proper breathing.
What does that mean?
That means if you're breathing with your chest, you're using about 30 to 40% of your lung capacity. By using the lower stomach, or what they call the lower diaphragm, you're using about 80 to 90% of your lung capacity. So it's not even so much about a deep breath.
If you're not exercising, you don't need to. Your brainstem regulates the depth and rate of your breathing. Yes, breathing, there's a conscious aspect of it, but there's also an unconscious aspect of it, because you can breathe when you are asleep, right? Your
Correct.
body knows when it needs more oxygen in other places. In fact, your blood vessels are constantly constricting and dilating to regulate the flow of oxygen to organs that need it more than other organs. And you don't know jack shit about that because your subconscious is just, it's the autonomic nervous system, okay? So this breathing thing, your body knows how much respiration it needs to perform every minute. This doesn't make any sense.
You said I don't know, but breathing, as a matter of fact, lower diaphragmatic breathing exercises the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the solar plexus located behind your stomach, and by exercising the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your nervous system that uses the heart, that regulates everything in your body automatically, you are exercising more use of this nervous system by doing deep breathings. You go through stress, Simon goes through stress, everybody goes through stress. We're going through stress. It's not like we're running away from tigers, but when you go through stress, what happens? The body goes into a fight or flight response. What happens when you consistently go through stress every single day on your way to work, but you're drinking coffee? The body goes into fight or flight response, and the body goes into shorter breaths, as if it is in a survival situation. So if you do this consistently, and you
what does this have to do with dark matter?
Okay, you want to redirect the point. This has to do with dark matter and dealing with the fact that we are not our bodies.
Tell me what dark matter is, because this is what I was talking about earlier. Earlier I asked you to explain what consciousness is in 30 seconds or less. Wait, is that the word I said? Was it consciousness?
You did say consciousness.
And you said something like consciousness is dark matter, and then a couple other things. And now from here, we've gone from dark matter, pineal gland, melanin, absorbing information, respiration rate. This is a string of nonsense. So we're going to just pick one thing. Tell me what dark matter is.
I would say it is kind of hard to explain.
You read a book about it. You seem extremely knowledgeable on.
And yet,
you said that book you read.
Quantum physics and yet quantum physics is only 20 to 30 years old in which they're talking about
Dark
matter.
matter has
I thought
nothing
this was
to
like Hermetic
do
ancient
with
knowledge.
quantum
It
physics.
is, but I'm speaking on quote unquote modern science, right? So if I'm using modern terms, I can't call dark matter primordial waters. You all will look at me like I'm crazy, right? So if I'm going to use modern terms, right, I got to keep
Dark
up with.
matter did not come out of quantum mechanics. It came out
It
of
didn't.
astronomy. No, it did not.
In astronomy is
Dark matter came out of observations of galactic clusters, galaxy clusters, and the rotations of galaxies by Fritz Zwicky and Vera Rubin.
So you're telling me that
Did those scientists write the book you're reading? No.
Ancients knew about astronomy.
The people that thought the sun orbited the Earth.
Who?
You're getting things mixed up. You don't know what these things are, but then you tell us that these things are what explains consciousness or whatever. Like consciousness is dark matter. What's dark matter? I don't know.
Well, dark matter is beyond.
So you don't know what consciousness is.
It's beyond the solar emanation force and physical reality as we know it. But
that was two different claims that you need to substantiate. Repeat what you just said and then back them.
Dark matter is beyond the light photon spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum as we know it, in physical reality as we know it. That dark matter is a substance beyond that. You want me?
We don't know what dark matter is. That wasn't a bad explanation, but ultimately we don't know. Well, it wasn't really an explanation. It was just kind of like you're explaining the properties or actually non-properties of dark matter, which is why it's called that, because we don't know what it is.
And this does connect to the idea of me having technically being a creator, but we're inside the mind of a creator, and anyone who considers themselves religious.
That's also a claim.
I understand that. Anyone who considers themselves religious or an idea of God, they should really put their idea of God in the sense of dark matter, because the idea of a creator is supposed to create everything. And the only thing human beings can conceive being beyond this physical reality is dark matter.
Claim.
No, we can't. We don't know what dark matter is.
Okay. What I'm saying is,
we don't even know what it is.
Is there anything
what does that statement even mean? Beyond dark matter. What does beyond mean?
Well, not beyond dark matter, beyond this physical universe, which they have coined to be dark matter. So that's the limits, right? Have they said anything
that made no sense?
Right. I don't know if I'm, where I'm losing you guys at, but again, if you're interested in where I got these sciences from, Kemetic psychology, and this is why I asked you about your own awareness, right? Because once the school of thought was as above, so below, as within, so without. So what my ancestors practiced and what they came to understand was, by studying the body, you were able actually to study the world outside of us, because just like we are pure consciousness, we are inside the mind of consciousness.
Those were three different claims.
This idea, I'm sure it was.
I think meditation and introspection can be deeply useful tools for somebody to try to understand, to get a better understanding of reality. Because what it does is it grounds you. But you're speaking of these things in like these really wild religious terms, which are interesting. It's cool. Like it's a cool conversation. It's not for me.